This story isn't in your textbooks. It lurks beneath the headlines, buried under decades of silence and sealed documents.
While we were digitizing the discs, we preferred to keep it a secret. We had fears that someone would steal and destroy the discs because they contain really important testimonies about the war.
It's not fiction. It's not a conspiracy. It's real.
Brian, who won't let you in, Brian?
They're here.
Who?
No.
Who?
No!
And it started with the fall of Nazi Germany. When the Third Reich collapsed, the world thought its horrors ended. But behind the scenes, something far more disturbing began.
Nazi scientists, some of them tied to war crimes including horrific concentration camp experiments, brought to the U.S. in a secret program to advance American security interests during the Cold War.
Scientists who once worked for Hitler were quietly shipped to the United States, not to face justice, but to build the future. Rockets, mind control, secret weapons, programs too dark to name.
That's right. These were Hitler's top weapons makers, and Operation Paperclip became a classified military program to bring them to the United States.
Why did America protect them? And what are we still not being told? Let's find out. The Whisper of Shadows. Annie Jacobson isn't a conspiracy theorist. She's an investigative journalist. With a terrifying talent for digging up truths most people would rather leave buried. When she sat across from Joe Rogan, what she revealed didn't sound like something out of a movie.
We can see not only is nuclear winter what was thought in the 80s, it's actually much worse.
It sounded worse because it was real. She talked about secrets born in the ashes of World War II, hidden programs, unthinkable science. Not just the kind used to build rockets or bombs, but the kind used to break the human mind. These weren't rogue experiments. They were organized, funded, protected. Most of us grow up learning that the Nazis were defeated, their leaders tried or executed, and their reign of terror ended. But Annie pulls back that curtain. What she shows us is a second ending to the war, one written not on battlefields, but in laboratories, military dossiers, and government files stamped classified. After Germany surrendered, Allied forces rushed in, not just to capture land, but to seize knowledge. Scientists, engineers, and doctors who had worked directly under Hitler suddenly became valuable assets. And instead of trials, many of them got contracts. This wasn't accidental. It was strategic. The United States feared that if it didn't take these scientists, the Soviets would. And so began a quiet operation to rescue some of the most brilliant and morally compromised minds of the 20th century. Their knowledge could change the world, or corrupt it entirely. To the public, these men vanished. But in reality, they were just getting started. Rocket propulsion, chemical weapons, and psychological manipulation, all of it was on the table. Annie's research revealed just how deep those roots go. She wasn't just telling a story. She was uncovering a blueprint, and it was American hands that rolled it open. Operation Paperclip. They called it Operation Paperclip. The name sounds harmless, even boring. But behind that name was one of the most morally complex and deeply secret programs in U.S. history. Annie Jacobson uncovered its full scale, and what she found was chilling. Right after World War II ended, the United States quietly brought over more than 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and doctors. These were not low-level technicians. Many of them were high-ranking members of the Nazi Party. Some had worked directly with Hitler. Others had overseen experiments so disturbing, even the Nazis tried to keep them quiet. So why did America want them? Because they were brilliant and dangerous. Men like Wernher von Braun, who had developed the deadly V-2 rocket that rained down on London, were suddenly seen as assets. The Cold War had already begun to flicker, And in that new global chess game, intelligence and technology mattered more than justice. The US military needed to win the race for rockets, nuclear weapons, and psychological warfare. And they were willing to make a deal with the devil to do it. Annie explained how files were rewritten, Nazi affiliations were hidden, and scientists were flown into the US under new identities. They were given homes, labs, and even citizenship, all under the promise that they would work for America now. No one told the public. No one asked for permission. Even some officials inside the government were kept in the dark. The idea was simple. If you have the chance to control the future, you take it, no matter the cost. But here's the part that's hardest to swallow. These men didn't just help build America's space program, they helped design the foundations of modern military and intelligence operations, which means, in a way, the world we live in was shaped by them. The mind control experiments. What happens when knowledge is taken from the hands of monsters and passed to those chasing power? Annie Jacobson revealed that Operation Paperclip wasn't just about rockets or weapons. It was also about the human mind. The US government didn't just inherit Nazi science, it inherited Nazi psychology, the dark kind, the kind that doesn't study the brain to heal it, but to control it. In the depths of Nazi camps, scientists had experimented on prisoners, testing ways to break the human will. Sleep deprivation, isolation, drug exposure, hypnosis, torture masked as science. These weren't rumors. These were documented experiments. And after the war, those same methods resurfaced. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA launched a top-secret program called MKULTRA. Its goal? Mind control. That sounds like science fiction, but it wasn't. Annie showed how Nazi research laid the groundwork for it. LSD trials, memory erasure, implanting false beliefs. They tested it on soldiers, prisoners, and even unsuspecting civilians. One of the most haunting truths? Many of the subjects had no idea they were part of an experiment. Joe Rogan sat speechless as Annie laid it out. The line between wartime atrocities and peacetime ambition had been erased, and no one was ever held accountable. This wasn't about national defense anymore. It was about dominance, psychological, global, and permanent. The CIA justified it as a necessary evil. The Soviets were doing it too, they claimed. But how far do you go before you become the thing you're trying to defeat? Annie's research makes it clear. America didn't just adopt Nazi science. It evolved. And if the government was willing to do this in the name of national security, what else have they tried? What programs still exist, hidden beneath layers of secrecy, still learning how to control the human mind? The weapons of the future. Annie Jacobson didn't stop at mind control. What she uncovered next blurred the line between science and science fiction. The Nazis weren't just experimenting with chemical weapons and rockets. They were chasing something far more bizarre, something that sounds impossible. But too many documents, blueprints, and eyewitness accounts suggest it was real. They were building weapons of the future. Deep in the mountains, under top-secret research bunkers, Nazi scientists explored exotic energy sources, anti-gravity propulsion, and what some now call Nazi UFOs. The Haunebu, the Bell, devices shaped like flying saucers, supposedly capable of vertical takeoff and faster than air travel. Most historians dismissed it. But Annie's work suggests the US didn't dismiss anything. When Operation Paperclip brought Nazi engineers to America, it wasn't just to build better missiles. It was to unlock whatever strange technologies the Nazis had started. Ideas that sounded insane, but maybe weren't. Joe Rogan leaned in when Annie spoke of files detailing early concepts of energy weapons, directed beams, remote influence, sound-based tech that could shatter glass or a mind. These weren't myths, they were prototypes. Some were tested, others were shelved. But the documents remained. And here's the wild part. Many of these projects didn't just vanish after the Cold War. They changed names, got rebranded, hidden inside private defense contracts and untraceable budgets. Why? Because weapons that target not just the body, but perception itself, are more powerful than bombs. If you can alter what a soldier sees, hears, or believes, you don't need to fire a shot. That's the future the Nazis glimpsed, and that's the future America chased using their science. So the question isn't whether those projects were real. The question is how far they went and whether they ever stopped. The ethical dilemma. At the heart of Annie Jacobson's revelations is a disturbing question, one that history keeps dodging. When you have access to evil knowledge, what do you do with it? The US faced that choice after World War II. Nazi scientists had built rockets that touched the edge of space, but also tested them on prisoners. They studied human psychology in ways no ethical researcher ever would. Yet instead of destroying their research, the US protected it, preserved it, used it. Joe Rogan, visibly unsettled, asked what many of us would ask. How did anyone justify this? Annie answered clearly. The justification was fear. Fear that the Soviets would get the same scientists. Fear that America would fall behind in the arms race. So the decision was made, quietly, strategically. Morality was traded for progress. It wasn't just about building weapons, it was about staying on top. And when national survival is on the line, ethics often become optional. But what does that say about us? Some of the men recruited through Operation Paperclip were directly involved in war crimes. Others turned a blind eye while atrocities happened in the name of science. And yet, instead of being tried at Nuremberg, they were welcomed into American labs. Annie's research shows that this wasn't a one-time compromise. It became a mindset. If the science is useful, the source doesn't matter. That's the part that stings the most, because it suggests that there's a version of history we never see. The one written not in textbooks, but in classified memos and black budgets. A version where values are flexible, where secrets are more valuable than justice. And if that's how our past was shaped, what does that mean for the choices being made right now, behind closed doors?
Now first, like always, be sure to hit the like button down below. It helps us out tremendously with the reach of this video. Thank you.
Are these programs still running? Joe Rogan leaned in and asked what everyone was thinking. Did these programs ever really stop? Annie Jacobson didn't hesitate. Her answer wasn't theatrical. It was grounded, precise, and disturbing. No, they didn't stop. They changed. They evolved. The same objectives, control, influence, and technological dominance were simply rebranded under new names, protected by deeper secrecy and modern bureaucracy. Operation Paperclip may have ended, but its spirit never did. Annie pointed to real evidence: redacted files, obscure patents, insider accounts. Programs like MK Ultra weren't anomalies. They were part of a larger pattern, a system that learned how to hide itself better with each generation. She described current military research into brain-computer interfaces, non-lethal psychological weapons, and advanced behavioral manipulation, all echoing the earliest Nazi experiments with mind control and perception. Only now, they're layered under the sleek exterior of national defense and innovation. The institutions changed, the faces changed, but the mission stayed eerily similar. These aren't conspiracy theories. They're documented transitions of power from one secret program to another. The past didn't vanish. It just disappeared behind more polished doors. And what makes it worse is that much of this research is no longer under public institutions. It's buried in private contracts and black budgets, where oversight is nearly impossible. Annie's point wasn't that the government is evil. It was that power, left unchecked, always chooses silence over truth. So, no, these programs didn't die with the Cold War. They simply learned to survive in the age of information, hidden in plain sight. The hidden blueprint of power. What Annie Jacobson revealed wasn't just a shocking history, it was a blueprint, a quiet architecture of power built not in the open, but deep in classified corridors where accountability rarely enters. Her research showed that many of the ideas we associate with American innovation were seeded by Nazi scientists. From rockets to psychological warfare, from experimental medicine to exotic weapons, their fingerprints are still on the blueprints of today. But instead of burning those documents, the US preserved them. Instead of prosecuting the minds behind them, we gave them labs, budgets, and freedom. Joe Rogan asked the obvious question, "Are we still doing this?" Annie's answer was unsettling. It didn't stop. It evolved. That's the terrifying part. These programs didn't vanish. They got smarter, more secretive. They moved from the military into private defense contractors, where oversight is even more limited. And today, they live on through projects we may never fully see, because they've been hidden under layers of new names and modern technology. The goal hasn't changed. It's still about control. Not just over weapons, but over perception, over truth, over people. Annie's work forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. We didn't just inherit Nazi science. We adopted its logic, and in doing so, we built a future that still answers to the shadows of our past, the truth that never left. This story doesn't fade with time. It lingers. Annie Jacobson's investigation peels back the illusion that the darkest parts of history are behind us. What she uncovered isn't ancient history. It's the hidden foundation of the world we live in now. The programs born in Nazi Germany weren't destroyed. They were absorbed, repurposed, and quietly continued. Scientists who should have faced judgment became celebrated pioneers. Their research didn't disappear, it was rebranded under classified projects. The US didn't just inherit its knowledge, it inherited their ambition, their willingness to manipulate, control, and reshape the future at any cost. Joe Rogan didn't need to argue. He listened. Because the story Annie told wasn't speculative, it was documented. It was built on real people, real files, and real consequences. It makes you wonder how much of what we take for granted, our technologies, our defense systems, even our medical advancements, are connected to ideas pulled from the shadows. This isn't about conspiracy. It's about continuity. Annie's message is simple, but chilling. When secrecy becomes the system, history doesn't disappear. It just hides. And maybe we've mistaken progress for truth. Maybe we've told ourselves we've moved on, because it's easier than facing the uncomfortable roots of our power. But as long as those roots remain, the story isn't over. The past didn't die with the war. It adapted. And it's still here, influencing everything we think we know. The silence that echoes. This story began in the ruins of a fallen empire, but it never really ended. The scientists we feared became the architects of our future. The horrors we thought were defeated were only repackaged, rebranded, and hidden in plain sight. Annie Jacobson didn't bring us a conspiracy. She brought receipts, documents, interviews, facts, all pointing to one conclusion. Some of the darkest knowledge in history wasn't destroyed. It was preserved. And we've been living in its aftermath ever since. We like to believe our world is built on progress, on ethics, on accountability. But what if it's also built on silence, on choices made in basements, under flickering lights, with no questions asked and no answers given? The truth isn't comfortable. It's not clean. But it matters. Because if our governments once believed that Nazi war criminals were worth protecting for their knowledge, what do they believe now? What compromises are still being made? What secrets are still shaping the technologies we use, the wars we fight, the freedoms we think we have? You don't need to believe everything to feel the weight of the question. This isn't about looking back in horror. It's about looking forward with clarity. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that unchecked power never sleeps. And maybe the real danger isn't what the Nazis did, but what we chose to do with what they left behind. The question is, how much of that story are we still living? Let's keep asking. The legacy beneath our feet. Walk through any major city. Look at the satellites in the sky, the rockets launching into orbit, the precision of modern surveillance systems, and you'll see the fingerprints of a hidden legacy. A legacy that began not in Silicon Valley, but in the war-torn labs of Nazi Germany. That's the part Annie Jacobson wants us to understand. These breakthroughs didn't come from nowhere. They were built on foundations laid by men we should have prosecuted, not promoted. Wernher von Braun, the celebrated father of NASA, once oversaw rocket production in Nazi camps where prisoners died by the thousands. His brilliance was real, but so was his past. America chose to look the other way. Not just once, but over and over, for the sake of staying ahead. What's more disturbing is how quickly those compromises became policy. Once you justify hiring one war criminal, the line moves. And soon, your enemy's science becomes your own. The ideas that once terrified you become the tools you now defend. Annie made it clear. We didn't just inherit data. We inherited a mindset. A mindset that believes knowledge has no morality. That if it helps win, it's worth using. That secrecy is safer than the truth. Joe Rogan asked, "Are we still doing this?" Maybe the better question is, did we ever stop? Because when you realize how much of our modern world is built on decisions made in the fog of post-war desperation, it changes how you see everything. The legacy of Nazi science isn't gone. It's under our feet, above our heads, and in the systems we trust without question. We're not just living with history, we're still shaped by it. And maybe it's time we finally looked it in the eye. This wasn't just a story about Nazis or hidden files. It was a story about the choices we made when no one was watching. The world we live in today wasn't only built in daylight, it was shaped in silence, under lock and key. Annie Jacobson didn't ask us to panic. She asked us to pay attention. Because when secrets become systems, the truth doesn't disappear. It just gets harder to recognize. And if the past still echoes in our present, maybe the most dangerous thing we can do is stop asking questions. Thanks for watching. Stay curious. Stay awake.